Hey everyone, hope you are doing well. I miss you guys very much. I don't know if you realize it, but we are in week 6 of fully online learning, and you guys have done an amazing job of keeping up with the forums, keeping in touch with me, giving me your presentation topics. So I just want to thank you for that. It makes my job a lot easier, and it'll definitely pay off at the end of the semester. I know we have a few lectures to catch up on, but I want to start with today where we're supposed to be, which is on Albert Bandura. Albert Bandura is a name you've probably heard in other classes. He's known for social cognitive theory, which is something that has gained quite a bit of popularity in the last, um, several decades. The reason being, it recognizes both the importance of your social environment and the way that you process information cognitively. And he talks about how um, important language is, how important symbols are, um, and what he says is that different people interpret different symbols and different words in different ways. I mean, we can see that just in everyday conversations where people may mistake what we're saying, and what that might be based on is the environment in which the message is delivered, the way the person says what they say, and symbols. Like what are some universal symbols? Like, for example, if we see red, we know to stop. If we see green, we know to go. Facial expressions, okay, those are pretty much universal. But as you've discussed probably in your developmental psych class or biopsych, your cognition plays a great role in the way that you perceive your environment. So he basically takes the whole nature nurture debate and sort of like says, yeah, it's both. And I think that people really kind of like that concept. I know I definitely agree with it. I think both your cognition and your cognitive ability and the environment that you are in has a great deal to do with the way that you express yourself and the way that you develop, different reactions to situations. At the heart of his theory is the concept of observational learning. This is a term that you've probably heard before. Observational learning basically doesn't have anything to do with reinforcement or behaviorism or behavior schedules. What he says is that the way we perform, the feedback that we get from other people, is what motivates our behavior in a very strong way. And I think there's something to that in the fact that, think about it. Right now, what are you doing? You're performing. You're doing your forums, you're communicating with your professors, you're trying to keep up with what's going on. And he said that, you know, observational learning is the best way to see what's going on with people. So sometimes, the best thing to do is to observe someone without them being aware of it. And you kind of see what they're like, unfiltered. But observational learning also is about we learn our behaviors and our attitudes towards things by the people who are around us, the people who raise us, the culture that we grow up in, the generation that we are a part of. Look at what's going on in the world today with online learning. I'm sure you've had some interesting Zoom sessions. I'm sure that you've had, you know, to watch some of your professors adjust to going from a ground format to this fully online format. And I find sometimes your generation is very helpful to my generation and my dad's in regards to doing all of this stuff. And what is that about? We're learning from you, and you've learned from us. There's a lot to that. Who else do we observe to learn from? Our peers, right? Which is why adolescence is such an important time. Childhood is such an important time, in the fact that, you know, whoever it is that we are associating ourselves with, we're going to probably develop those norms, which is why your parents are always worried about that friend, or they love that friend, whoever it might be. But Bandura, he really revolted against the whole idea of behaviorism, um, and using reinforcement. He's at basically, if you think of B.F. Skinner with the Skinner box, which you learned in Intro to Psych, he's the complete opposite, like the way that he thinks. But I can say this, that reinforcement does work. It does work when it's immediate, when it's consistent, and when the reinforcer is something that the person understands. But he also talked about vicarious reinforcement, and punishment. He basically said that we learn what the consequences of our behavior are going to be based on watching other people vicariously. And you see this in families where, you'll have like that one or kid in the family who gets in trouble all the time. And then you'll have the other kid who never gets in trouble. It's not that they don't do anything that they're not supposed to. It's just that they vicariously learn through their older sibling what to do to get away with whatever it is that they want to do. If you watch kids, especially, and young people your age, there's a lot of vicarious reinforcement going on, in the fact that you do form cliques and you do form groups, and they're usually people who are like-minded and have the same interests, the same values, and you vicariously reinforce each other throughout that interaction in the group. He also said that most of our human behavior is actually self-regulated. He said that what we are always doing is we're kind of comparing our behavior to whatever we think the standard is. So again, he's talking about societal norms and standards and our need to meet those. So could those standards be different in different cultures and societies? Yes, of course. Excuse me, I need my caffeine. He talks a lot about self-efficacy. Okay, self-efficacy refers to what a person is actually capable of doing. I don't know if anyone's ever said to you, "Oh, you need to reach your potential," or "You have so much potential. Why don't you see it in yourself?" What he said is that because we self-regulate our behavior, our self-efficacy is based upon what we believe that we are able to do or not do, and that plays a huge role in anxiety, depression. Um, Motivation, right? You talk about, how to work with people who struggle with those issues. And what are we always trying to do is kind of get it into their heads that you are capable of getting out of this situation. You are capable of handling your mental illness. You are capable of handling the craziness of life, global pandemic or not. Um, and uh, People like this theory because it's a lot more positive, and it puts a lot more emphasis just on yourself. And so he breaks away from all the psychoanalytic stuff, all the behaviorist stuff. But he does say that we don't have defense mechanisms, but we have what are called self-exonerating mechanisms. So I'm just going to list those off really quick. The first one is moral justification, where you justify your behavior based on what you determine to be morally correct or incorrect. He talks about using euphemisms, labeling people that way. He also talks about a displacement of responsibility as an exonerating mechanism, where like, let's say you start talking to someone about something and you say, "This is bothering me," and they blame it on this, that, and the other thing, and they're not taking responsibility for it. That's displacement of responsibility. He talks about Another self-exonerating mechanism is the disregard or the distortion of consequences, meaning, you know what, I don't really care what happens a month from now because right now I'm going to do what I want to do because it makes me feel X, Y, and Z. This is something that we're seeing right now in the communities that struggle with addiction, where they're not meeting in groups the way they normally do due to what's going on with the coronavirus. And people are, to use a euphemism, falling off the wagon. Why they do not have to do as many mandatory urine analyses. They are not meeting with their groups in person. So there's kind of like this like diffusion of responsibility, which he also talks about, where it's like, I'm not going to think about tomorrow. I'm only going to think about today. And I think most of you probably know that that's not the best way to go about things. Why your problems are still going to be there the next day anyway. So he talks about attribution of blame, playing the blame game. And I'm sure you've all had conversations like this, whether it's with a friend, a family member, or a romantic partner, where it's like, you do, blah, 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 blah. And they go, well, you know why I do that? And they give you the 50 different reasons. And the whole time you're just kind of sitting there and you're like, you're not taking any responsibility for what you're saying and doing. And I think because he basically talks about us needing to protect ourselves from the criticism of others because of those performance standards that we're always trying to reach, that we use these self-exonerating mechanisms similar to defense mechanisms, similar to the unconscious devices that Karen Horn and I talked about. And he said that psychological problems basically arise from dysfunctional expectations, meaning expecting too much or expecting too little. A major goal in psychotherapy, as far as he is concerned, is to change your perception of your self-efficacy, to realize that you are able to reach the highest potential that we have. And that goes into what we're going to talk about next week with Abraham Maslow and Carl Rogers with the concept of self-actualization. They're very similar in that concept of, human beings are striving to be the best that they can be. However, we do have obstacles that come in the way, and sometimes we can be our own worst enemies in that way, in the fact that if we don't believe that we can accomplish certain things, we will basically self-sabotage ourselves into it. And I'm sure you can think of an experience where you kind of talked yourself into, oh, I'm not going to be able to do that, so I'm just not even going to try. Or it might be the opposite, where, you didn't think you're going to be able to do something, and then you said, well, screw it, I'll just try it and see what happens. And then all of a sudden you were successful, and now it's an activity that either that you're able to do, or you might even actually enjoy. That's one of the challenges with being a college student and going on with your education. Why the demands from your professors, from the people you're doing your internships with, family members, your own demands on yourself. Sometimes, I see really good students self-sabotage themselves because they just don't know if they're going to be able to reach that performance standard that Bandura is talking about. He also kind of veered off into talking about chance encounters, running into people or seeing people that you knew at a different point in your life, that can significantly impact you. It can make you kind of take stock of what's going on in your life, and I think there is something to that. I'm a little older than you guys, and over the years, I've run into some people like I've gone to college with, or I've worked with, or I grew up with, and I tell them I'm a college professor, and I've been in the field for over 20 years, and they tell me what's going on in their lives. And sometimes I've walked away from those conversations like, wow, I was at a gas station on my way up to the mount one day, and I pulled over in a rest stop, and I was sitting in my car and I was drinking my coffee, and someone knocked on the door on the window, and I didn't recognize them right away, and it was a gentleman, so of course I get defensive, Brooklyn comes out. I'm like, "Can I help you?" And the person smiled, and then I knew who it was, and it was an old friend from Mount St. Mary's, um, who we used to hang out with all the time, and I haven't seen him since 1998, and so it had been at least 20 years. And he's like, "Oh my God, you look exactly the same," and I'm thinking, "Oh my God, you look exactly the same, except that you have no hair whatsoever, and I did not recognize you at first." And we just started chatting about our lives, our marriages, kids, all that stuff. And he asked me, "Where are you going right now?" And I said, "Oh, I'm on my way up to the mount to go teach a class." And he started hysterical laughing. I was like, "What's so funny?" And he was like, "I always knew you'd end up back at the mount, and they're paying you to be there. They're paying you to talk." And so uh, I walked away from that conversation feeling pretty good about myself. Why? He knew me at a time when I was sitting in the seats that you guys are sitting in right now, and the same classes. He was also a psychology major, so it was interesting to see his perception of me 20 years ago, and then to look at like this chance encounter that we had where we both were kind of like, "Wow, I knew you were going to turn out this way." And it was a positive thing. It could also be negative. you know you run into somebody who like brings up stuff that happened a million years ago, and it's just not worth getting into it with them. But what it's all about at the end of the day is your perception. Um, Basically, as I said at the beginning of this, his emphasis is on the present and the future rather than the past. And so that conflicts a lot with some of the stuff that you've learned about all semester about the unconscious and digging at the iceberg, and all of these unconscious devices that we have and everything else. And my suggestion to you is to take an eclectic approach and look at all of these different theories, and realize that there's validity to all of them. And human beings, we are extremely complex. And when it comes to our emotions and the way that we think and the way that we respond to our environment, I think an eclectic approach is best in trying to understand someone. So I hope you find this theory interesting. I will be posting the lectures for Allport and iSync and Cattell over the next day or so. As you know, the last week or two has been a little bit crazy, and I'm just trying to play catch up. You guys have been amazing with staying on point with your forums and giving me your presentation topics. I did send you an email yesterday, kind of outlining all of the stuff that's going on for the end of the semester. So if you have not checked your email, please do that today. And please do the second forum on Albert Bandura, which you'll find on the homepage below when you scroll down on eClass. I hope all of you are well and safe, and I truly miss you, and I am looking forward to seeing you in the fall. Please keep in touch, and have a great day. Okay? Take care.